I understand I do have some new viewers from the Ellie De La Cruz video, where I led that video off saying that this isn't the normal content. The normal content is a lot of this, is a lot of this background. I'll be in a different shirt. Sometimes my facial hair will have grown out, so I guess continue to watch at your own peril and or convenience. With those more familiar with the channel, we're going to be going back to the Browns positional previews for the upcoming season, this time going over Cleveland's linebacker room. This group, I feel like as is it's fine, it's serviceable, but if injuries do start to become an issue like they were last season, and not a ridiculous amount of injuries like there were last season, but if they do start to pop up here and there, we could see another situation where they're making an emergency trade for a guy like Deion Jones like they did last year, where Deion Jones still on the free agent market. I don't think he's coming back to Cleveland. Different kind of thing. But we're going to get right into the actual players who are on the roster right now. We're going to start with who would be a middle linebacker in a base defense with Anthony Walker. He was re-signed this offseason to a one-year deal after there were some signs that he might leave. I believe he did meet with the Washington Commanders this offseason, but he does come back. A very team-friendly one-year deal as well, pretty much as low as you can pay for a veteran like Anthony Walker. Not only has he been pretty solid from an on-the-field playing standpoint, but his leadership has been a tremendous impact for the locker room, and we saw what happened when he left that, how the position just kind of went awry essentially. And in the week 2 debacle against the Jets, where they gave up 2 touchdowns and they blew one of the assigned coverages, it was mentioned that Anthony Walker on that play where the Jets scored, I believe on the first play of their drive to really get back into the game, he was off the field for that play. That was something that the defensive backs who were questioned on that did mention. So Anthony Walker being on the field has definitely had a positive impact for him, and it is felt when he's not there. Now, as I mentioned, last season was cut very short for him due to a season-ending injury that occurred in week 3, so he should be ready to go by now, but it was unfortunate that he had to miss pretty much most of the entire season last year. So I'm going to be assumed that the good play from him is going to pick up right where it left off unless proven otherwise. I don't think the injury is going to cause a major dip in his production in that sense. Moving on to Jacob Phillips, also suffered a season-ending injury last season, but that one happened in week 7. He's entering the 4th and final year of his rookie contract. He has shown flashes of both good and bad play, so there is some evidence that he could grow into a decent starter if he does take some steps this year, but there's also evidence that he's not really quite ready for that kind of role yet, or that he's even going to be ready all that soon. Last year obviously was an incomplete grade. He only got to week 7, and this could be a year for him to take some really large steps forward in his development. I do feel like the organization has shown a lot of faith in him. They do want to hang on to him moving forward, but he's going to have to show that he is going to take some leaps and be ready for potentially a starting role, because who knows what Anthony Walker will do after this contract ends. Then you also have Jordan Kunaszyk. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. There's an S and a Z and a Y all right next to each other, jumbled in there. Managed to grab a spot near the bottom of the 53-man roster, but he still did manage to get on the final roster last season. He would also end the season on IR, but not until much later in the season than those other 2 players I just mentioned. He did re-sign on a one-year deal this offseason, a pretty cheap deal in terms of money. He was mostly a special teams contributor to the Browns last season, had 22 combined tackles, a forced fumble, and a deflection in 15 games. So if Bubba Ventrone likes him, I do see him that he might stick around. He could be a couple years in the Cleveland Browns uniform. There's also Charlie Thomas, a rookie undrafted free agent out of Georgia Tech. And honestly, there is opportunity in the middle of this linebacker group that if he sticks out, he could be a guy who jumps up and steals a roster spot. This linebacker group, like I said, the depth is a little questionable, even though it does have some strong starters on it. If one of these undrafted free agents or a guy they nab off of a practice squad, if they come in and they show signs of life, they could get a spot on this final roster if it is that big of a fit for both the team and the player. Now moving to some who would more play on the outside of the linebacking core in a base defense, starting with JOK, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who will be JOK throughout the rest of this video. He's entering his 3rd season, only got into 11 games, including missing the last 4 on IR. You're sensing a theme with some of these linebackers here. 70 combined tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, and 4 pass deflections. He showed off a lot of his elite speed last season. He really got to where he wanted to go very quickly. Sometimes the issue was there were plenty of times where he went to the wrong spot. Where he wanted to be isn't exactly maybe where he should have been. Sometimes he seemed a little bit confused as to where he should have been, or maybe he just didn't feel like where he was planned to go in the play wasn't right for him, or some other thing like that. I'm hoping that this was just a result of the mess that was last year from a defensive coaching standpoint with Joe Woods, and we all seem to knew that he was going to be fired about halfway into the season, but he was still kept around, and just the system that wasn't really working with the entire defense. Hopefully with a new defensive coach in Jim Schwartz and a more clear direction, hopefully we get to see more of JOK being dominant. And I don't think he had a bad season, maybe just not as much of a leap from his rookie year as you would have liked to see. I think it would be a bit too harsh to say it was a step back, especially considering some of the injury concerns that he had, but I do think he still has all of the tools that made his rookie season so exciting to watch, and so optimistic for the future on him. I do think that JOK is due for a huge leap. Hopefully Jim Schwartz is the guy who can unlock that guy from being a steal in the second round to a guy who truly unlocks his potential and becomes one of the premier outside linebackers in the league. Moving on to Sione Takitaki, definitely one of the most fun names to say on the team. Re-signed to a one-year deal this offseason. He's another guy who ended the year on IR after getting injured in week 13. In 12 games, he had 71 combined tackles, 4 tackles for loss, including 1 sack and a forced fumble. He plays on the special teams as well, so he is versatile in that way. Maybe if he doesn't see as many defensive snaps as he did last season, Bubba Ventrone can find some use for him. Although, again, looking throughout this entire linebacker room, I'm not really sure why he wouldn't see as many defensive snaps as he did last season. I would put him as a safe bet to make the roster. He will make a pretty nice play every once in a while that does make you feel like maybe he's destined for more, but overall just kind of a solid starter. I don't think he's a starter in a really good linebacker group. I feel like if it's one of the best rooms in the league, he's probably more of a depth rotational piece. Then you're moving on to Tony Fields. Third year of his rookie deal, 5th round pick out of West Virginia. He did play in all 17 games last season, so breaking the trend of getting hurt mostly on special teams than on the pure 11 on defense. He did have a pick 6 in week 13 against the Houston Texans for this team. All in all, he had 48 combined tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery, and 1 pass deflection. Not really sure if this organization has a long-term vision for Tony Fields, but he's here for now. He's on the roster, and we'll see how he shakes out during camp. Then moving on to our final name on this list, Mohamoud Diabate. He was a rookie undrafted free agent out of Utah, although he mostly played with the Florida Gators. Last season with Utah, he had 58 total tackles, 13.5 tackles for loss, including 5 sacks. Also had a forced fumble and a pass deflection. Like I mentioned with Charlie Thomas, this linebacker group is the most susceptible, in my opinion, to have an undrafted rookie like Mohamoud Diabate is. If he were to come in and he makes some noise, then he could definitely make this final 53-man roster if it is the right fit for him, and he does show a lot of flashes in training camp and in preseason games. This could be a guy who nabs a spot in the final 53-man roster and runs with it. But that's going to be it for this video. Thank you all for watching to the end if you made it this far. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of the Browns linebacker room, and I will see you at the next one.